Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel. Have you ever had the experience, and I'm silly asking this question, it's almost like, have you ever seen the rain kind of thing? Well, have you ever had that experience where you find like, I just try to keep being there for the narcissist. Nothing I do is enough, and so now I always feel like I'm exhausted? Drop that in the comments because that's what we're going to break down today. And if you're new to this channel, please subscribe. And if you're really new to this channel, this is a very healing-oriented video. We have a deeper healing program. You can go hit the link in the video notes and you can get more information on that. But let's talk about this idea, because what I'm talking about, this like, I'm exhausted, I can't do enough, it's a common sentiment in survivors. So, okay, so you do all you can. Let's say your parents getting older, your narcissistic parents getting older, and you just keep trying before they die or they become older or they become more infirm. You don't want to be full of regret. You keep trying and doing and caring and doing what they want. At least it's clear to you that they don't see you. By now you see they don't see that you have your own life. And you're exhausted. And they don't notice. And you feel like you've been doing this since you were a child. You know why you feel that way? Because they have been doing this to you since you were a child. Now, this same exhaustion feeling can happen in a long-term committed relationship too. You keep doing and trying and you don't want a divorce or you don't want to end the relationship. And maybe you're getting older. Maybe you have children. Whatever the reason is, you keep striving, you keep trying to be attentive and appeasing. You engage in radical acceptance, you disengage, but you're exhausted. The same could happen if this is a relationship with a narcissistic friend or other family like siblings or even co-workers. And then over time, you start to recognize, or you start to feel, as many survivors of narcissistic abuse do, that simply being with other people is exhausting. Being with anybody, not even just the narcissistic folks. Some people who have endured long-term narcissistic abuse wonder if they've become introverted, or they're socially anxious now, or they're socially unskilled. You may find it yourself holding back when you're invited to things, saying no to plans, and assuming that all of this social exhaustion is your fault because you're not doing social right. So this exhaustion you may feel from being with other people, whether it's the narcissistic people in your life you need to care for, or just anyone, is what we would expect from survivors of long-term narcissistic abuse. So why is that? Here I'm going to really turn the framing on this to the work of the absolutely brilliant Daniel Shaw, who writes about the impacts of narcissism in relationships, especially what happens when a person has a narcissistic parent. He believes that what happens when a person has a narcissistic parent is that the narcissistic parent is very much incapable of fostering something that he calls intersubjectivity, this idea of a relationship characterized by mutual recognition, which is a fancy way of saying you see them and they see you, and you see each other as separate entities with separate needs, and that's good. That where there's awareness and experience of yourself and the other person, that you could hold on to your own needs and feel safe in holding on to your own sense of self. You can feel safe in expressing your needs, your wants, and your aspirations, and be able to do so without being shamed or mocked or rejected. Intersubjectivity is literally the opposite of what happens with a narcissistic parent, who actually literally resents the child for having needs, shames the child for having needs. The narcissistic parent, like all narcissistic people, is delusionally grandiose. And as part of that, they see themselves as being above having those silly human needs. They disavow those needs because they can't stand seeing themselves as dependent. They project those needs onto the child, which allows the parent to remain grandiose, and the child feels shamed by the parent for having any needs. And the child then internalizes this resentment and the shame projection of the parent, and the child then experiences self-blame and self-loathing for having needs. If you grew up with a narcissistic parent, this was your childhood. So, you, as a child to survive, try to become what the narcissistic parent wants or needs. You attempt to become a mind reader, and you give up your wants, your needs, your hopes, and your joys to live in the shadow of the narcissistic parent and renounce your needs in favor of what the narcissistic parent wants. And because no child is need-free, ever, On those moments when there were needs, as hard as you tried to push them down, you were shamed, and those moments would turn into self-blame. You will feel things like, oh, I shouldn't have needed anything. And that sentiment, I shouldn't need anything, is what you take into adulthood. Well, folks, this cycle doesn't end just because you stop being a child. It remains as long as you and the parent are alive, and even after the parent dies. Instead of trying to be quiet or keep your room clean or get good grades like you did as a child, or just unquestioningly endure the narcissistic parent's abuse, you probably didn't even know it was abuse. In adulthood, it becomes continuing to silence your needs or pursue professional pursuits that the parent wants for you, or get married because the parent expects you to, or hide your true wants and hide your true identity and still keep trying to please them. You feel obligated to care for them, and as the narcissistic parent gets older, you may exhaust yourself in the last hurrah, the final act of trying to finally get it right. And the narcissistic parent is always there with their bottomless well of passive aggression and manipulation to leave you feeling guilty, or believing that their belief that feeding and housing you entitles you to forever have to exist in their service. All of this is the most exhausting thing you could imagine, because this pattern of surrendering your needs to the parent, which is how your life basically began, starts to sustain in all of your relationships. You end up doing it with everyone, friends, whatever, romantic relationships. And so all relationships become a forfeiting of yourself, of your needs, of your interests. You believe and are almost wired to pawn off yourself to keep a relationship going. So why would a relationship be rewarding to you? Relationships are going to be depleting by definition. So you're literally going to be exhausted by other people, because another person means no more needs for you. Now, that doesn't mean everything's hopeless. It means recognizing this pattern for what it is. Narcissistic people are like mini cult leaders. They want everyone to succumb to their will and will manipulate them to do so. After a childhood of, in essence, being programmed to believe that your needs are meaningless, your parents should take precedence, and internalizing the shame your parent continues to project because you do not sacrifice yourself for them, that's a big shift. But to end this cycle of exhaustion that's brought about by interpersonal relationships means seeing yourself and appreciating yourself as separate, as an individual separate, not only from the narcissist, but from all the other human beings, with your own needs, your own wants, your own hopes, your own desires, and your own life. That there's no shame in who you are and what you need. And that if a narcissistic person rejects you, you're going to be fine. You're going to be more than fine. But they constantly dangle that sense of, I'm going to reject you, and that's how they keep their power. That's only how they keep their power if the rejection is a problem. This isn't easy. It means pain, grief, mourning, fear, none of which is pleasant. It's actually kind of easier to keep doing and doing and doing until you drop, instead of not doing what they want and feeling the pain, which for many people can feel more scary and hopeless. To push back on this means about 1,000 small actions you can take every day. Taking the time to know your preferences and enjoy them. Paying attention to friendships and relationships where you are heard. And in fact, taking the time after a social encounter to pay attention. Was I seen or heard in that interaction? And I say this as a survivor. After any social interaction, I pay attention to whether I feel less tense or happy or stronger. When I do, those people are the keepers. These are not easy cycles to end. It takes time. It typically takes therapy, but it is also the radical acceptance. None of us can make the narcissist happy because narcissists don't do happy. They do control. So sacrificing yourself and your identity to make someone else happy, that's not love, that's abnegation. And what they are doing, shaming you for having needs and shaming you for having a separate self outside of them and expecting you to remain hostage to them, well, that's theft. This exhaustion is normal in survivors. It's not just the exhaustion of dealing with toxic people. It's the exhaustion of every social interaction feeling like a loss of your sovereignty and a sacrifice of your need and your identity. With healthy people, they will recognize you and see you because that is what healthy people do. You can have that relationship where both people are seen and heard. That is mutual recognition. This is literally impossible with a narcissistic person, and far too many people have exhausted themselves and given up their lives in the name of trying to please that narcissist one last time. The fact is, we are all responsible for our own happiness, our own joy, so stop hitching your wagon to theirs and stop giving up yours in the empty pursuit of trying to make them happy. There is no version of this story where you will do enough for them. So just do what feels right to you and take your life back. It's the only path forward. Thanks again.